Hi, everyone. Just a few things before we get to the content. So welcome to the Salto webinar. We'll talk about DevOps best practices today for managing your Jira configuration. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent immediately after the session. Feel free during the session to either use the chat window to chat among yourselves, or if you have any question for me, use the Q&A tab, the Q&A panel. Feel free to ask any questions that you may have. I'll stop at points during the talk to answer them, and we'll have another Q&A session at the end of the demonstration. All right, let's do this. So before I present myself, what am I going to show you today? So I'm going to show you three important things, three big things. First, how you can analyze your Jira change impact before actually implementing them. The second thing is how you will be able to safely implement those Jira changes without any risk to production. And I'll show you a demo of how to deploy any configuration, any change to Jira, whether it's big or small, from your sandbox or staging to production, or from production to sandbox and staging in either Jira data center or cloud. So all of this in our session today. And maybe more importantly than all of these, I'll tell you how to become what we call a real business engineer. Let's go. So my name is Lior Neudorfer. I'm part of the product team in Salto. Salto was founded 4 years ago. I'm located in Tel Aviv, Israel, but we have offices in San Francisco as well, 70 employees, and we are well funded by some of the best VCs in the world. You see on the right, Bessemer, Lightspeed, Excel, and even Salesforce Ventures. Okay, let's start with the big picture, and let's talk about SaaS applications. So you're Jira admins, but Jira is one part of your company, right? So any modern company runs on various SaaS applications. So if it's Jira, maybe for R&D, and Salesforce for your sales team, Zendesk for your customer support, maybe NetSuite for finance. These are all modern SaaS applications that are crucial or critical for the modern company. If one goes down, if there's an error, if something's broken, business is lost. This is the reality. Now, as you all know, and you know this better than I do, all these applications require deep customization. They don't come prepared for your specific use case out of the box. You don't just use vanilla Jira. You customize it, and sometimes you heavily customize it. We've seen customers with thousands of custom fields, hundreds of automations. These are very common instances that we see. But this presents a lot of challenges. So let's talk about these challenges. I hope that you can relate to some of these pains, and then we'll talk about how Salto can solve these for you. And I'll show you a demo. We'll present the philosophy behind it. So first of all, the most basic question when you get to a Jira instance or to any other business application, how do you actually know what's implemented? So which automations are there? Which of them are actually working? What are the custom fields? What's used? What's not? What's the implementation? So yes, you can dig in hundreds of UI views and you can click your way through Jira, but this is hard. How do you get a good full picture of what's the implementation? If you look at Jira changes, how do you know for a specific change? Let's say you see a custom field. Who added it? Why was it added? How is it used? When was it added? This is a question which you don't have a very good way to answer. When you're planning a change to Jira, what's going to be the impact of that change? So if I remove an option from a multi-select custom field, Will something break in Jira? Will some automation or script runner script stop working? Maybe something will break out of Jira. Maybe there's some integration between Jira and Salesforce, which now when you do your change will silently stop working, and you'll discover it maybe 3 days afterward. Which brings me to the next challenge. How do you develop your changes and test these changes reliably without impacting production? Let's continue. Usually in larger companies, there's more than one Jira administrator. Maybe you have a team, maybe you've delegated work to Jira administrators across the organization. How do you own Jira together? When somebody does a change, how do you collaboratively review those and create what we call collective code ownership? Jira is not owned, like if you take Jira, it's not divided into silos and each person has its own thing that he's doing. That's not a good case because then people make mistakes. You want to own code as a team. Once you, let's say you did your change on some sandbox or staging environment, how do you reliably promote that change to production? Most of the times when we ask this question, we ask Jira admins, once you tested your change, how do you actually do it in production? Most of the times their answer is, we just manually do it again. We write what we've done in staging or in the sandbox, and we just go to production and we do it step by step again, which sometimes works, but it takes a long time and it's not very good. If you do a change which for some reason did break production, how do you quickly roll it back and reliably rolling back everything that you've done? Two last challenges. There's a yearly audit. And the auditor wants to see, okay, can you show me which changes were done to your configuration? Who did them? Why did they do them? How do you keep a paper trail for compliance reasons of all the changes that you've done throughout the year? And finally, how do you know when you get an implementation? And a lot of time, Jira admins, they don't start from scratch. They inherit some existing implementation. How do you know that it's actually working? That it's not slightly broken in places that you haven't noticed? Automations or screens or workflows, these are hard questions. So I hope these challenges sound familiar, because I'm going to tell you how we think they should be solved. And again, feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A tab. So if we think of these challenges, we actually have another place in which had similar challenges in the organization, but it was already solved. Think about IT and infrastructure, and think about 20 years ago when you had to get a new server to build a database or something. So you would go to the IT team and you would ask them, okay, I need a new server. And it would take them maybe hours or maybe even days to do that. Why? Because actually getting a server is hard, even with virtual servers, even with virtual machines. They had to go into all sorts of VMware wizards and click next, 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 and allocate storage for that. And it was all very, very manual and error-prone and slow, which meant that people who needed infrastructure and developers which needed infrastructure built for them had to wait a long time, which led to long delivery cycles, which led to infrequent releases. You can't release software fast if any infrastructure request takes hours or days, right? So this was 15, 20 years ago, but this was solved. And how was it solved? It was solved with the infrastructure as code revolution or transformation. Today, if I need to spin up infrastructure for a new database or new servers, what do? I go to Terraform, I write a bunch of code stating what I need. I need 3 servers replicating, I don't know, Elasticsearch on this Amazon region, go. And Terraform does all the work for me in minutes, right? And this can be automated, and I can build automated tests on top of it and CI/CD pipelines on top of it, and everything works faster and more modern. And this revolution led to faster release cycles. In Salto, we release we release new features to production multiple times a week. This is only possible because of this transformation, right? So faster release cycles, shorter delivery sessions, and eventually increased quality. Because if something doesn't work, we can fix it really quick. And this is the modern way, right? If you think about software developers or DevOps, this is how they work. They work with code. So if we take that revolution, the infrastructure as code revolution, and let's try to apply it to what we're talking about today. And this is what we call business engineering. Business engineering means that we should adapt these best practices and methodologies and tools that the developers and DevOps already use so well. Let's adapt these into our world, into how we manage our business applications. And it can be Jira, it can be Zendesk or NetSuite or Salesforce or Okta or Workato, you name it. Let's take these tools which are working well for DevOps and use them in our world. Sounds good, but what does it actually mean? And this is where we get to the interesting part, because this is the vision which we implemented with Salto in the demo I'll show you today. So the first thing, the basic building block for this revolution in our business applications is taking the entire configuration and representing it in text or in code, which means that think about your 1,000 custom fields, workflows, projects, automations, script runner scripts. Take all of these from all the various screens, and instead of leaving it there, represent all of these as text. One folder with thousands of files representing that configuration. As soon as you have that, you already have immense power. For example, you can just do Control F. You can find things. If I want to see where something is used, I do Control F. I just search over my entire code, and that's it. I don't have to go through various screens and clicks. Okay, let's build on top of that. So if we have the entire configuration as files, as text, or as code, we can put it in Git. We can put it in a source control system. And then every change we do to the configuration is essentially a commit, right? So if I added a new workflow which uses 2 new fields, and then I put that in Git, I have a version. That version represents a specific version of my configuration. You can run code analysis tools on that. You can build tools which run on this code and answer complex questions. What depends on what? If I change this, what will break, right? These are very easy to write when you have everything as text. It also helps you create shared responsibility within your team. So instead of each person touching their own parts in Jira, everyone touches something which affects the same code base. So exactly like software developers have their repository and they see what others are doing and they review each other's work and they impact it, they add to it, they object to it, right? There's a shared conversation, shared responsibility. This can now be done on your Jira configuration. What else does business engineering mean? Let's stick to the concepts which are working for developers and for DevOps. Never develop on production, always develop in sandboxes. And it's really easy to build these sandboxes now that you have everything as text, right? Take production, represent it as text, and then push that text into your sandbox, replicate that production. When you're done with production, when you're done with your change in sandbox, how do you move it back to production? Through Git, you open a feature branch, you open a pull request, another Jira admin in your team can review that change. And once it's approved, you can promote that change from dev to production right? And it's easy. It's if everything is text, then things are easily movable between environments. Tiny changes to a workflow or entire projects, move them back and forth to whatever you want. And some administrators can even take it further. CI/CD, continuous implementation, continuous integration and deployment, all sorts of automations around your Jira configuration. You can really take this far, depends on you. Rollbacks are super easy to do. You're in version number 5 of your configuration. You know that something broke. You can just git revert to an older version and deploy it to your production. That's it. You roll back a change. You can also do it for just specific elements. So this is the vision, right? You have this source control in the middle, versions for each change. You have a paper trail for every change that you've done. It's now versions in your Git. You can roll back. You can review each other's changes, like software developers, like DevOps do. So this is what we call business engineering. And this is what I'm going to demonstrate to you, because we've developed a tool which enables you and empowers you to be this business engineer. It's important to say that everything I show today, we're talking about Jira, but this applies to any other business application. And by the way, Salto also supports all these business applications. So it's not just the Jira team which can work with configuration as code. You can actually have Salesforce as well, or NetSuite as well. And think about the benefits here. If you have multiple business applications running as code, you can actually see integrations between them. So you can analyze them as one code base. So if something in Jira is somehow connected through some automation or integration to something in Salesforce, you see it because it's a single code base, and you can analyze it. You can see you're going to change something, it will affect Salesforce. This is the vision. We should have a standard way across the entire stack to practice business engineering. Okay, it's time to do a demo. Again, feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A panel. I'm here to answer them. Don't wait until the end. Okay. Great. Make sure that you're seeing the right thing, and we'll go full screen. Perfect. So this is Salto. Salto is a SaaS platform into which you connect your Jira instances. You can see that I connected 3 Jira instances to this to my Salto environment. I have 2 sandboxes and 1 production environment. This works with Jira Cloud. It can also connect to your Jira DC servers, so it can do whatever your customization is. The first thing we do when we connect to a Jira instance is we fetch the configuration. What does fetch mean? It means that I connect using APIs to your Jira instance, and I pull the entire configuration into Salto. So, for example, if I'm looking at my sandbox right now, I can see all the Jira elements here. So if I open the automation folder, I can see the various automations that I have here. If I open the field, I see the various custom fields that I have in this environment. Eventually, all these are just files. They are files because we represent the entire configuration, the entire Jira configuration as files on our system. Okay, so let's look at some fields. Okay, so let's say I implemented a new field in my sandbox environment called SLA level. Okay, so I can select it. I can see all sorts of details on it. I also want to show you, I can jump to Jira and see the same field in Jira itself. And I can also see the field context. So for example, if I go to the field context, I can see the various options which are implemented on this multi-select field. Great. So everything is files. Because I have everything as files, I can also analyze what depends on what. And this is the first powerful thing that I want to show you. Let's say I'm going to change this field. I'm going to change SLA level. I'm going maybe to add an option. Maybe I'm going to rename one of these options. Okay, so for example, I don't know, urgent SLA. I'm going to rename it because we have some change in our business. And I want to know if I'm going to change this, what's going to break? Does something depend on this field that I need to know? So all I have to do is to go to this field, the SLA level, and you can see here, I see a references section, which means I can see who uses this field. I can also see that this field depends on the custom field context. Of course, it can't work without the context, but this is more interesting. I can see that actually there's some automation and some workflow which use this field, which means that if I change it, I have to make sure that these will continue working. I can do something else. Let's say I care specifically about the urgent SLA string, right? I'm going to change that specific option, and I want to see, okay, where is that string being used? So I can do a content search, which essentially is Control F on all the files. Okay, think about find all in Word. So I'm looking for urgent SLA, the string, which means that even if it's buried in some script runner script, buried in some post function of a long forgotten workflow, we will find it, right? So you can see, oh, there's an automation here which actually uses the urgent SLA, string. And there's some workflow indeed, which compares some value. It has a value field condition to make sure that something isn't urgent SLA, right? So think about how powerful this is. Before any change you do, you get the ability to quickly understand what's going to be impacted by this change. Okay, good. I already see questions. I'll answer them soon. Okay, so first powerful thing that we saw, how you can plan your changes to avoid impact, to avoid bad impact, to avoid breaking your environments. Okay, let's move forward with our story. Let's say that now I've implemented what I've done. I've done a new automation called Alert Noam on Urgent SLA. I built a new field, SLA level, and these are all things that I implemented on my sandbox, right? So if I click this automation, I will also show you this in Jira. I have this global automation called Alert Noam on Urgent SLA, whatever. It's not important what it does. So I've done these changes on my sandbox, and now I want to move them to my production instance. Most of the times, what you'll do is you'll probably do it manually, which means you'll go to production and you'll go to global automations and you'll add, and then you remember, oh no, the first thing I have to do is to add the field. So you go to custom fields and you'll add the field and you'll manually enter the various options. This works. Most of you are probably very experienced, so most of the time it works beautifully, but I'm sure you'll agree that it's annoying and slow, and sometimes it just doesn't work. So let me show you a more modern way. So this is what we call deployments. It allows you to deploy any changes from one instance to another instance. It can be sandbox to production, or production to sandbox, or staging to UAT. We don't really care what these instances are. And deploying our new SLA automation. Okay, cool. So what does compare and deploy do? The first thing it does is it compares the two environments. It shows me a view of all the things which are different between the two environments. So for example, if I go to the additions tab, these are all things that I have in my sandbox, but I don't have in my production server. So I can actually dive in and see exactly what are these new things. Okay, and I'm here to deploy my new automation, so I can quickly find it or search for it, and I can review it as well, but I know what it is. It's great. But if I click it, you see that I now have a required dependency. What is a required dependency? It means that Salto analyzed your environment and realized that in order to deploy this automation, you have to deploy other things as well. So let's see exactly what it is. Okay, makes sense, right? This automation depends on the SLA level field, which still doesn't exist on production. I built it only in Sandbox. So actually, Salto won't allow me to deploy this automation without selecting the field as well. Okay, so we automatically analyze what are the dependencies, the minimal required dependencies to do your work. Okay, so I selected that field, but I see there is now another issue. Okay, so let's go to the missing dependencies tab because something's still missing. And if I look at it, okay, this makes sense, right? Because the field actually depends on its context. So I can select the context as well, which brings me to 3 selections. I'm going to deploy an automation, a field, and its context. And I have no missing dependencies, and I can continue. One more cool thing that I want to show you. Remember that field that we're moving, SLA level? I can also see what's it used by. And I can see that this field is also used by some workflow. Some users may say, okay, wait, I also developed this workflow to work with this field. I should include it in my deployment. This is optional. It's just a way for Salto to remind you, hey, there are some related changes to the things you've selected that you may want to include in your deployment as well. You select whether you want to do it or not. Okay, so I selected 3 things: my automations, and my automation, my field, and the context, and I preview my deployment. This is important. What Salto does now is it takes your chosen elements and it calculates a plan, how to deploy it to the instance, which API calls to do, which errors may happen. And this is the place where Salto will warn you, listen, there are potential problems with your deployment. For example, you're trying to deploy an automation, but the owner of the automation in your sandbox doesn't even exist on production. Let's help you with that, right? Or some API limitations that we have to work around, right? Or you're trying to change this workflow scheme, but that will require migration. Let us walk you through this, right? Because for issue migration, when you change a workflow scheme with statuses and everything, we need more input. This is the place where we do all this analysis, and you'll see it here. But specifically in our case, all the 3 changes that we've selected are ready for deployment. Great. So I click deploy. What will happen? No, this is important. I've defined my production environment as sensitive to get this extra warning before I deploy it. So it asks me, are you sure you want to do it? Yes, I do. And that's it. What Salto does now is it uses the Jira API to actually deploy these 3 things, the automation and the field. And hopefully that's about it. Let's see if it works. All right. And I'm done. Deployment successful. I now go to my production server, which is called Salto test. And I want to prove you that it worked. And I go to global automation. Hopefully, I see the newly deployed one. There it is. Alert now on urgent SLA, updated a few seconds ago by Lior Nodefer. Okay, cool. So this is safe, right? This is better than manually doing your changes again. I'll answer some questions before I continue. Okay, when comparing and deploying, how would I make my deployment preview available for someone else to review before I deploy these changes to production? Thanks, James. That's a great question. This is all shared. So if you have multiple people on your team, you know what, let me quickly do some mock deployment again. Test deploy. So it means that if I go to the compare and deploy screen, I can actually see other deployments which are being worked on right now, which means if I have someone that is on my team and is in Salto as well, they can go into this deployment as well. They can review it. You can choose whether they can even help you add elements if you want. Some teams want to build your deployments together. Some of them just want to review once you move to preview deployment. Another person can review it. And if you want to go all the way to be a real business engineer, Salto actually supports automatically opening a pull request for each deployment. So once you click on preview deployment, you can't deploy. On GitHub, we open a pull request. That pull request has to be approved by someone else in your team, and only then you'll be able to click deploy. It's a relatively new feature, which the more advanced users are using to build a more safe flow around their deployments. I hope that answers your question. 2 more questions. Does Salto support configuration changes for Confluence, or is that something on the roadmap for the future? On the roadmap for the future, we definitely see a need for more Atlassian products and for more Jira add-ons as well. We already have basic support for Script Runner, and we're continuously adding support to reading configurations of more and more things. I hope that answers. There's another question here about ServiceNow. We don't support ServiceNow as an application yet. Can I use Salto to... Another question. Thank you. These are really, really good questions. Can I use Salto to script the creation of multiple objects like sprint boards for different groups to deploy without having to manually make those changes in the sandbox first? Yes. The answer is yes. Everything is files. If you want, Salto connects to a Git repository. I can actually show you the Git repository that I connected to. You can, there you go. I have this Jira, this Git repository, which has all the files of my Jira configuration. You can connect to it, create by your own script, you know, thousands of whatever you want, automations, sprint boards, you name it. If you can script the creation of knuckle files, this is the language that we use, and then you push it to the repository and you use Salto to upload it to your sandbox. So you can, what I've shown you in the demo is how to move things you've done in Jira in the UI from sandbox to production, but we also support taking your own changes from code. So you can script your own code creation and upload it to Jira. Again, I want to tell you, actually, there's a good story about this. One of our customers had this problem. They had hundreds of automations, and they weren't global, they were attached to specific projects. And then they had this problem where every time they built a new project, they now have to manually go through 200 automations and add this project to each one, which is painful. But once you have everything as files, think about how easy it is to do this task. You just script something which takes 200 automation knuckles and adds this project to each one of them, and then push it back to Jira. So having everything as text really helps you do that. Okay. I'm sorry, going back to the deployment, I do want to show you one last thing. Push to Git. So I've just deployed this change, but it's not in my Git repository yet. So all I have to do now is push to Git. and it automatically prepares a commit for me, which I can then push to Git. So for every deployment, I will build a corresponding commit version in Git. Think about how powerful it is. A year afterwards, you have a complete history of who did what and where in a very accurate way. This also helps you integrate with Jira from another perspective. If you have a Jira ticket for each Jira configuration change, then these commits will show up on that ticket as well, if you enter the right ticket ID. Okay, I think that's it for the demo. I've shown you how to analyze the impact of potential changes, how to safely do things and make changes on Sandbox, test them until they work, and then deploy them automatically with a few clicks to production, and how to connect this entire thing to Git, which enables you to maintain a version for each configuration change, and which enables you to do advanced things like having other team members review your changes before deploying them. That's it from my end. Let me just show you. I want to give you this. So Salto has a free tier, and if you log into Salto today, you can use this QR code, and you actually get free forever access to Salto, to the Salto free tier. The Salto free tier allows you to do the impact analysis part. So you can connect, you can pull your Jira configuration into Salto, you can analyze changes, you can click through your way what depends on what, and to plan your changes. And that's free forever. So feel free to join Salto today. And if you want to actually deploy things, you can sign up for our pro trial, which is also available on the same place. And that's it from my end. If you have any other questions, you can either use the Q&A tab now, or visit us at salto.io, at our LinkedIn, at our Twitter, whatever you prefer. Let's see if we have other questions. Okay, so thank you. We have a nice pricing page. There's another question about the pricing. There's a salto.io/pricing. We price Jira according to the number of Jira end users, similarly to any other Jira add-on. You'll get more details in our pricing page on our website. All right, thank you everyone, and thanks for writing thank you in the Q&A. Cheers and have a great day.